Let me share with you 7 things I hate about your sales coach. Not to rain on anybody's parade. If you've got a great sales coach and they're working for you and you're getting great results with them, then stick with them. Doesn't matter what I think in that case. But if you don't like what you've been told to do, if you don't like the direction that you've been coached in, if you don't like the things that they get you to do, then check this out because I'm pretty sure you're going to discover that sales is not what you were taught it was. And I'm speaking from 30 years of experience in the field. So, the first thing I hate about your sales coach is that they teach you how to sound like a salesperson. You get things like script, tonality, power phrases, objection handling. Yeah. Fake curiosity. Okay. The buyer is not stupid. They can hear that machinery turning underneath. Okay. They know what you're doing. So it's not fooling anybody. Sometimes they'll just play along. And in many cases, they'll play along and they'll actually maybe enjoy it if they know what the process is. But don't think that you're being a good salesperson just because you've mastered tonality. Now, I know there's sales trainers and coaches who have made a career out of tonality. I almost never concern myself with it, and I've probably sold way more than they have. But not to have a dick measuring contest, right? Just it's not as important as people think. There's one particular spot where I think tonality matters. And we all know about scripts, right? At the beginning, sure, I can kind of understand. If you don't have any experience being a salesperson, you got to have something, some sort of song sheet to deal with. So some scripting is good and some pain point phrasing, right? Common problems people experience. But if all you're doing if all you're getting out of your sales coach is the demand to be a regurgitating machine, say this way, do it this way, and handle them, you're not being served very well. The second thing I hate about your sales coach is that they teach you to manipulate instead of diagnose. They're always saying phrases like create urgency, control the conversation, handle objections. Okay. How about figuring out what is actually happening in the customer's world? How about we do that? I don't know if you've noticed this as a salesperson, but people, prospective customers, rarely tell you the truth, rarely tell you the full truth, right? Especially when they just meet you. They don't trust you yet. You got to dig and dig and dig to get them to go instead of manipulating. Let's look at diagnosing here, okay? The third thing I hate about your sales coach is that they confuse activity with progress. And you're going to see this all the time. More emails, more calls, more LinkedIn messages, more CRM entries. Listen, none of that matters if you're pursuing the wrong opportunities. A good sales coach has got to step back and look at the whole field and go, are we going after the right market segment? Are we talking to the right sliver or group of people in our whole total addressable market that we're likely to close here? Or are we chasing ghosts? Because a lot, having looked inside many, many companies over the years, a lot of them are chasing ghosts and they get more activity in the CRM. Oh, I called this person, I emailed that person. But yeah, the deal's not dead yet, but it really is. You just haven't put it to bed yet, but the customer has. They're not going to buy. So make sure you're pursuing the right opportunities, will you? Don't confuse doing things with getting ahead. Okay. The fourth thing I hate about your sales coach is that they teach you to qualify your buyer instead of qualifying the problem, right? Just go right into car sales and see what happens, right? We've got very specific ways of qualifying people just as they step in, right? How about qualifying the problem, right? I have made my career about monetizing the problem, helping the prospective customer figure out with me using their numbers so they can't argue with me, right, at the end. How big is the problem? What is the actual size of the problem? You get BANT, right? BANT style checklists can become a bureaucratic exercise. You know, what's your budget? Who's the decision maker? When do you want to buy? you're not going to get the truth of those things in one meeting. Unless the person is unusually self-aware and wants to share it with you. How many people are like that? How many customers actually want to solve the problem? There are people who go to the doctor with a serious illness. I was talking to my doctor recently, and he said, Jason, people come into my office having heart attacks and say, I'm going to go home and deal with it there. Okay. Do you think that somebody looking to buy some sort of system from you is going to tell you the full truth? Instead of going through a litany of checklist questions, and I've seen this for years. You know, when Jeremy Pope and I were running the closing engine, we would run into this all the time. There would be a list of questions to ask, and after each one, the salesperson would move right on to the next one. And the impression the customer got was, I don't care. You know, how many kids have you got? Whatever. I don't care. And then moving on to the next question. Right? Is that how you want to be perceived? Is that the work that you want to do? Do you think you're doing something there? Right? Customer doesn't know when they want to buy. They have no idea. You have to help them create that. Right? And there's more going on. Who's the decision maker? The bigger the organization you get into, the more decision makers there are, but there's usually 2 or 3, even in a tiny company. All right. People will pretend to be the top dog, but they're not. Exaggerating. Hey, look, if you're new here, my name is Jason Kanigan. I help experienced B2B professionals figure out why good opportunities stall and how to get them moving again. Most complex B2B deals don't stall for the reasons sales training teaches. I think we're going through some of that now. My approach is called Consultative Challenger. It's a mix. It's especially great for people like me who came up through the consultative selling path and then found the limitations of that. And then when Challenger Sale came out, we adopted it, usually kicking and screaming. I waited 2 or 3 years to start implementing it because I didn't want to be seen as fighting the customer. And I found out that, wow, many of the things that I had learned as consultative skill sets directly applied to consultative or challenger selling. So I created my own approach after decades in the field, coaching, training, and being a salesperson. Right? I have made calls recently. There's not many sales trainers that can say that. You know, a lot of them haven't made a dial in 10 years, right? So created this approach called Consultative Challenger. Stick around, you'll learn more about it. Getting back to number 4 here, teaching you to qualify the buyer instead of qualifying the problem. What's wrong with that? Well, let me ask you this. What if the customer's understanding of the problem is wrong? This happens frequently. Like just about every engagement that I'm brought into as a consultant, they come to me and they're like, oh, we got a sales problem or we got a lead generation problem or something, right? And, oh, yeah, okay. Look, I ask around, I talk to people in the organization, I gather data, and invariably, that's not the problem. The problem is something else, somewhere else. You know, people are not good at diagnosing their own problems, right? Have you ever tried to write sales copy for yourself? It's pretty darn hard because you got 100 features and benefits in your head about working with you and all the things you can do, and you know 100% of it all, right? Somebody outside of you looks and goes, shut up about 97% of those things and just talk about A, B, and C, will you? That's it, okay? So the customer's understanding of the problem is often wrong. So if you qualify the buyer instead of the problem, you're solving for the wrong thing. And that is going to give you a lot of trouble as you try and close the sale. The 5th thing I hate about your sales coach is that they tell you to overcome objections. What is an objection? Is it a baby crying? No, I don't want to go to nap time. Or is it information? I ask you to check. I think you'll find it's often information. If the buyer says, that's too expensive, your job isn't necessarily to overcome that. You need to understand what the price is being compared to. What's the anchor here, right? And what's the value that they perceive? Again, going back to the last point, if you took their word for what the problem is and let them misdiagnose and you allow that to continue, the size of the problem is probably going to be small. So instead of overcoming objections, dig for what brought that up. What caused that? What made them say that? Why do you say that? Might be a starting point, right? You guys worry about all this baloney that your sales coaches teach you about tonality and, oh, I'm going to manipulate them. I'm going to say this special phrase and it's going to trap them in a corner. Do you know what you get out of that, by the way? Buyer's remorse. What's your refund rate like? So, you know, your job should stick. Your deals should stick. Okay. So don't be in a rush to overcome objections. Listen, I was there. In the late 90s, I borrowed a book from a friend called How to Master the Art of Selling by Tom Hopkins, who has since, follow him on LinkedIn, mellowed out and become more consultative. But at the time, he'd written this memorization book, right? They give this objection, you give this rebuttal. Start memorizing. And I got to tell you, I thought, this is what sales is? Ugh, I was like 18, 19, 20 years old, right? This isn't what I want. This isn't an enjoyable thing. I don't tie downs, right? All this stuff. You don't need to do that. And it leaves a bad taste in the customer's mouth. They know it. And your soul probably knows it, okay? Unless you're a sociopath. Maybe you are. There's a lot of sociopaths out there. The sixth thing I hate about your sales coach is that, particularly if they're a consultant working for a company, right? Reporting to the president, they assume every opportunity should be closed. Can you see how dangerous that is? Can you see what trouble that causes? Some customers are not worth getting. I don't know how many times in my career I've had a deal in front of me, a sale I could make, and I went, nope, not going to do it. Okay. It was true in the Sandler training. It's true now. Sometimes the best deal is the one you never make. You need to be looking and going, are we going to lose money on this deal? You might, particularly if there's a high service cost to it, right? In implementing the solution. And this customer is very difficult. Are they going to email you at 2 a.m. and want an answer instantly and get angry and have that anger bomb spill out over everywhere if they don't get an instant answer, right? There are all kinds of reasons why you shouldn't do a deal, not the least of which is they aren't really your target market, right? I've made this mistake over the years, right? You need the money, this client really isn't in the exact target market band. They're outside. I can do it though. We're not the best at it in that category, but I can do it. And they trust the name, So let's go ahead and do it. And it just doesn't work out well. Walking away from a bad fit opportunity is the best thing you can do. It is not failure. It is sales judgment. And sales judgment seems to be something that just exits the room immediately when the sales coach is on the line for performance and improving things and their money. Remember that phrase, right? It's impossible to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it. Discovers like, oh, I want to close everything because I get paid or I get rewarded or I get praised for the deals that are closed, not the ones that, well, in truth, this would have been bad for the company. And the problem is you can't prove a negative, right? Prove that you don't own a sailboat, as somebody famously said once. How? Right? So you can't go back in time and run the simulation and take the client on and then see the disaster and then point it out to the client and go, look, see, that sucked, right? Do you trust me now? So this assumption that every opportunity should be closed, you should fight to the death for it, we should bring anybody in as long as they're willing to pay. So not every opportunity should be closed. We have to have some judgment here, but your sales coach very likely ejects that stuff right out ASAP because perverse incentives, right? If you don't know about perverse incentives, go to my blog, salestactics.org. It's been around since 2014. Yeah. And I don't know anybody who's had a blog that long anymore. I'm sure they exist, but people come, people go. I'm still here. And look up perverse incentives in the search. Okay. You'll see some stuff. The seventh thing I hate about your sales coach is that they have never had to live with the consequences of their advice. Yeah? Somebody can teach closing techniques all day without being responsible for revenue, margin, implementation, the customer relationship, or operational consequences in the organization going forward. Okay. Those are some serious freaking things. Right. They're just push, push, push because that's what I'm being paid to do. Oh, I don't have to actually go do it. I can just lean over your shoulder and advise you on what to do or direct you what to do. It reminds me of a quote from President Kennedy who said, in times of trouble, everybody wants to give you advice. But when you're the president, when you're the real decision maker, you got to make the decision on your own. The advisors are free to move on to new advice. That's the line from him. Okay. And that's what I hate about your sales coach. They get to just not live with the consequences of their advice. So what could happen with, again, all the things we've talked about so far? Sales team sounding like salespeople, manipulating instead of diagnosing, confusing activity with progress, qualifying the buyer instead of the problem, overcoming objections instead of figuring out what it means, and assuming every opportunity should be closed. What could happen to revenue there? Well, you might think it would go up, but I guarantee you refunds are going to go up. Frustrated clients are going to go up. Your negative score and reputation is going to go up. Okay. The margin, if we're pushing to make every sale, what do people knee jerk to? Sellers, what do they knee jerk to? If you have any experience, you'll know what the answer is. Discount. They'll discount. Okay. So is that good for margins? Is discounting good for margins? No. No. Implementation. What sort of implementation problems could be caused by bringing in the wrong people because we were told to close everything and increase the activity and manipulate them into buying? What implementation issues could happen? Oh, this is a special case. Again, it's not our typical client. We don't know that kind of organization. And now we're running into all these hurdles and roadblocks that we didn't anticipate because it's a different kind of customer than the one we've got expertise in fixing or working with, right? Oh, that never happens. And then your customer relationships do sour, right? Operational consequences. I'll give you just one, okay? There are zillions here. I'm an operations management guy. I was trained in how to manage factories, so I know all about this stuff. I actually applied it to sales early on in my career by cutting it up into steps and then figuring out what was the best, what was the worst, what needed keeping, what needed throwing away. But operationally, if you and your organization sell stuff, there is a bottleneck in the organization, a main one, and then there'll be others after that. And even if you fix that one, the next one will become the main bottleneck in getting what you promised to the customer. Okay. So let's say you really, hit it hard and make a ton of sales. And now you end the quarter with a whole bunch of new orders. Okay. Your implementation team, the operations team, has to go and do this stuff, right? And you probably just overloaded them. Let's begin with that. Second, because you brought in all these customers that aren't your ideal client profile, your people are having to learn, make mistakes, discover new solutions to things, spend time doing that. And I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but there's a statistic that a handful, it's Pareto's law, right? A handful of people do the work of the organization, right? And there's a square law in there somewhere. But basically out of 20 people, like 4 are doing all the work and the rest are sliding, floating, not putting in 100% effort or 50% probably. So now You got these few people overloaded. Let's say there's one top tech person and she is needed in 5 different customers at once because your sales team went out there on the advice of your sales coach and closed and closed and closed like crazy, right? And got every order they could. Let's not even worry about the margins or anything else right now, right? It's we brought in the wrong kind of customers. They're not really a fit for us, but boy, we wanted that revenue, right? Somehow we wanted user adoption. The only time to concern yourself about user adoption is venture capital. Okay. When you've got the money and you're out there to buy customers in the market to prove that this thing, has a market, is usable, and people will eventually hopefully pay for it. Um, but let's say there's this one top tech person and she's needed. And so where do you send her? You've got 5 fires burning, 5 customers you're in the middle of trying to implement, and you cannot proceed on 4 of them because she's busy. Okay? Wherever you took her off of, those people will complain. The 3 others will definitely complain. And she's not going to instantly fix everything at the 5th place, right? Where she's just been assigned, because she has to get the lay of the land, figure out which way the sun is coming from, what to do in that situation. So that's just one example of operational consequences. Okay. I'm willing to bet that your sales coach is teaching you how to sell in a traditional sales way, right? Features and benefits, overcoming objections with rebuttals, wrestling the pig in the mud is what I call it. Okay. I'm interested in teaching you how to think. And if you want that difference in your sales life, then go ahead and, follow these videos, subscribe to the channel, give it a like, do what you need to do. But be wary of who you're taking advice from as a sales coach. And I know it's tough when you're an employee and the big boss comes in with, somebody like me, the consultant, who's here to tell you what to do now, right? I really try to not do that, but you're there for your expertise. But anyway, in summation, the 7 things that I hate about your sales coach. They have a logical progression here. They're not just 7 complaints, okay? First, they teach you how to sound like a salesperson instead of a human being. Yeah. Second, they teach you how to manipulate instead of diagnose. Third, they confuse activity with progress. Most of our actions, Peter Drucker would love this, right? Don't result in anything. Most of our actions are wasted. Fourth, they teach you to qualify the buyer instead of qualifying the problem. So you often miss the point. The customer misses the point. Even if they buy the thing from you, maybe it even does what it says it does. It doesn't fix anything for them because you're addressing probably symptoms or a symptom and not the underlying problem. Fifth, they teach you to overcome objections rather than figure out what made that objection come up in the first place and what does it mean? What does it indicate? Okay. Sixth, they assume that every opportunity should be closed, probably because of perverse incentives. And seventh, they've never had to live with the consequences of their advice. They can move on to new advice. Well, look at all the activity that we did, and we brought on all this revenue. I don't know about anything after we take the money and we sign the customer up. That's, somebody else's problem. You got to look over there. Oh, and you had nothing to do with it, right? In causing this problem. All right. I hope you got a lot out of this. I'll see you soon.